Hello, I'm Professor Margaret Rogers Van Coops, and I'm about to teach you about the soul structure coding part 2. I've explained part 1 in terms of the archetypes, the goals, the modes. And so now where we're coming to is the attitudes. And I want to explain more about the attitudes in terms of the way it influences us. So we have to go back to the mother. When a mother gets pregnant, the spirit of the baby to be has to bond with the mother in the womb, and while it's doing that, it's actually integrating its own soul structure coding with the soul structure coding of the mother. So there are certain parts that are sort of integrated in the way she carries that child, the way she thinks about herself during the pregnancy, and of course that would stimulate her soul structure coding to nurture herself and nurture the child while she's carrying it. And then once the baby is born and enters the birth canal, the brain automatically switches on the soul structure coding, meaning that the baby will pop out and is alive and now aware of its presence in this world in simple ways through physicality, being touched, through vision, looking out and about, and babies today are born with their eyes open, and also aware of the brain kicking in whether one feels safe or not. If the circumstances of the birthing are unstable, then the child will know that, and that will stimulate the soul structure coding to begin self-preservation and protection. If, on the other hand, it's warm and cozy and the baby is born nurtured, then that will stimulate the soul structure coding to be positive. So you can see right here in the beginning that the attitude of the child is stimulated by the attitude of the mother as to whether they are going to look at the world through positive or negative eyes. So I'm going to tell you what the attitudes are, and then I'm going to talk about how they interact. The attitudes have an alliance with one another, as did the modes. So we'll begin with pairing them up so you can understand. So once again, coming back to the heart chakra, what we see are two aspects: the idealist who expects everything to be very well done and perfect, versus the skeptic who expects everything to go wrong. If we think about the idealist in terms of coding, a lot of us at this time are encoded with the idealist simply because we're in transition and change, and so we are all looking for a better world, a better place to live in, with good clothing, good health, good work, etc., etc. Now, the two sides of the idealist are obviously either positive or negative. In the case of the idealist, the positive aspect is the coalescence of learning to integrate self with mother, father, grandma, grandpa, and so on both sides during the early hours of birth and thereafter as they grow up. As they learn to walk and talk, they're going to be copying the people who are their role models. They don't know anything physically, they don't have wisdom yet or intelligence beyond normal baby existence. And that can vary with each child. Some will cry a lot, some will laugh a lot, and it's all relative to their soul structure coding. Now, if a child comes into embodiment as is stimulated to go into the negative aspect of the idealist, then they will have abreactions to things around them. That's like saying something happens and they don't know what it is, so they start crying. And if this isn't nurtured into a positive mode over time, the idealist will be easily abstracted with various ideas about different things that they can do, and that can lead to choice later. And of course, being coded by the idealist, they want to make the best choices in life and will have a very positive attitude about how they coalesce with other people. But if they've got negative role models around them, then they will be abstracted with the different things that happen. There's no correlation that makes sense, and often these children don't know where they fit in, and so as a result of that, they either withdraw and become insecurity conscious in terms of the way they process everything through their coding of the modes. That means their personality develops negatively. If, on the other hand, they have the positive side of the idealist, they will fit in, coalesce themselves with what's going on, understand, learn quickly, and feel very safe. If they're stimulated because they have the skeptic, then what we're going to be looking at is the way a skeptic investigates the things that are going on around them. You'll know a skeptic because they're always asking a lot of questions. Why are we doing this? When are we going here? What is it about? Why should I have to do it? And so on. They're always asking questions, and they're all expecting a no, because skeptics are expecting the wrong things, not the right things. So even though they're investigating, they're still not sure. They feel insecure, and anything that they find out is new information that could disturb them a great deal, or it could inspire them in some way to learn more. If they're in the negative mode of it, they can be very suspicious. You tell them that you've got a present for them, and they're suspicious that that present could be something that's more of a nuisance and a hindrance than help. They tend to expect the worst, not the better. The skeptic is inclined to do that. Now you might think, well, why would anyone want to be a skeptic and be negative? Well, the bottom line is that in change, there has to be some people who are going to turn up and say, well, if you do A, B, and C, which sounds good, but what about X, Y, and Z that could happen? How can we prevent the negative arising? So skeptics are monitors of the standards, rules, and regulations that we have, and they'll be the first to stand up in adulthood and say, I don't agree with these rules and regulations, etc., etc. I don't believe that you are really going to change the world's existence in terms of food and whatever we need, so I'm the doubting Thomas. And they often have a lot of issues with trust, where the idealist doesn't. The idealist just expects everything to fall into place. So of course either are going to be very upset if things go wrong. The idealist will flounder around looking for something more productive to do instead, whereas the skeptic will withdraw and say, I don't want anything to do with these changes because I know they'll go wrong, and I'm going to now go away in my own private way and downmouth everything, talk about everything that's bad, because I want everybody to know that we're not making good changes, we're making bad ones. So they keep one another balanced. The second two pair coming into the mind are also important in terms of the way we look at the world. The first one that I know that I was working with at the time was a spiritualist. Being a medium at a very young age, you can see that I needed to verify, that's the positive side of the spiritualist, by trial and effort. So as I would go out and give a message, I would also be double checking that they were happy and content and that everything I told them was helpful, and in that way I was verifying my skills and saying, hey, I really understand what I'm doing. On the negative side of the spiritualist is faith. And, a lot of us don't know answers to things. And so we rely on having faith that things will turn out okay. And when we are trusting faith, where in many ways you're hoping that God will jump out of a cloud and help us to overcome our obstacles, whatever they might be. And of course, the more faith we have, the more we try, the harder we hope we'll find our spirituality and understand what makes people tick. So spiritualism is very much about researching the logic of why we feel the things that we feel. And with faith going into religion and philosophy, you can see that the spiritualist is going to be embracing a lot of that information because they want to be able to explain it away as justification for their beliefs or their thoughts and their ideas. Now, the Stoic, which pairs it, is very much likely to say in some way, I don't believe you. But when they're positive, they're more tranquil about their approach to change. They tend to investigate, then sit back on their laurels for a while, processing it for themselves in terms of their lifestyle, remembering that the mind is very much of the oneness and spiritual consciousness and earthly perceptions of the way that the world is running. And so a Stoic is like the catch-22. I'm for it and I'm against it at the same time. If they can find a balance in what's going on around them, then they find the tranquility they're seeking. If they can't find it, then they're going to be in many ways resigned to what is and just living with it. They're not the kind of people that go knock down walls. They're more about, I'm a stick in the mud, and if I'm not happy with the changes that people are making, I'll just put up with it because I'm not strong enough to go out and make a change. So I'll spend time grumbling and mumbling about what's going on around me, but I'm not actually doing anything about it. So the Stoic can be an anchor. They can hold people back in their negativity, or they can in some way take a tranquil attitude where people try to pull them in, but somehow they're still watching and observing, waiting to see just if there are good changes versus bad ones. So these two work together as well. Now when we come into the physical body, we have the realist and the cynic. The realist is this is this and that is that. Black is black and white is white. And their whole perception of the world is according to it is, it isn't. It's up, it's down, it's in, it's out, it's roundabout. And they will validate that by giving talks or telling people, listen to me, I know better than you, I've lived longer, I'm the realist, this is bad, don't do that, or this is good, you'll be okay. But the negative side is supposition, and when you guess, which is what supposition is, that things will turn out right, to a realist, they have a great deal of expectation that if they're talking about the negative, that in some way they're 100% right, and anything they say they might end up guessing and surmising in some way that what they believe is true. And I have seen people out there with this coding who have insisted the things that they believe are right for everyone. And of course, given time, they start to realize that their suppositions don't always turn out and they can be very wrong. And that opens up their belief in their perceptions to think more spiritually. So we go from being physical and worrying about the football to wondering how many people attending church need their help in some way as a realist to guide them in practical ways to do better for themselves. And that means they have to go and change the perceptions of people. So they can be good talkers, and they can assume in many ways through supposition that you'll listen and you'll learn from them. But of course their lesson is you can't make all the people change all the time. You can only reach a few, and a few will maybe listen, and then you've sown a seed of change in the physical world. So if you have a bunch of yo-yos to sell, and you try and sell them for $400, you can see that your supposition that you'll sell hundreds of them and make a fortune is not very likely. But you have the ability to talk yourself through realism to say, if you really promote it correctly, you'll make money. So a realist can be let down by their beliefs and their thoughts, and of course they learn the hard way. Whereas the cynic will already know that yo-yos won't sell at that price, and try and in some way contradict you and make you see some sense, and that's the positive side of it. Well, if you spend all this money, you'll be broke by the time a year's gone by. Are you sure you really want to do that? Because I see that if you were to knock that yo-yo down to $30, you got more chance of selling hundreds of them at that price and make even more money. So the cynic, even though they sound negative, can actually be an eye-opener to the realist to say, rethink what you're doing. The negative side of the cynic is denigration. Okay, what that means, denigration, is putting things down, saying that nothing ever works, nothing's very good, nobody cares, nobody understands where I'm coming from, there's no one to advise me, so I'm just feeling at a loss in terms of what I can do to save myself or anyone else. And of course, when a cynic is lost in their cynicism, then they actually are not likable people. People don't want to be with them because everything they say is in some way put down. So what's their job there? Well, basically, the more you come up against someone who's negative, the more you find reasons why you would want to do something that is inspiring you to try. And so the cynic stirs up the realist and makes the realist do some work that they probably might not have done otherwise. Meanwhile, the realist will touch the cynic in such ways as to make them understand that they're locked into the negative aspects of their point of view of the earth and themselves in it, and would need to face the facts and adapt and climb out of being negative. So these two support one another in the body and in the ways of life. Now, if we are assimilating, and a lot of old souls do assimilate, then we would come down with the coding in the attitude of the pragmatist. The pragmatist is very much someone who looks for practical ways. What that means is where the realist and the cynic is coming up with ideas and bouncing around on them and not necessarily getting anywhere, the pragmatic would come in and take their ideas and ground them, put them into a reality that makes everything a possibility and ultimately steps towards success or failure, is also part of the pragmatist. And that when they come up with the practical solutions to do something, they can argue very strongly about their point of view and say this is the only way to work, and if you try any other way, it's going to fall apart. And if they're really adamant in their points of view, they could become dogmatic, which means that it doesn't matter what you say to them about your ideas and things you want to share, they're coming back with all their reasons logically and emotionally, mentally and physically, because this is a simulation in being a pragmatist, to take all the facts and move them all around until you can come up with a very practical way to apply, in this case, the yo-yos that we mentioned, to say, well, if you make a pretty box and if you put it on Amazon, you're likely to sell way more than just trying to sell it on Facebook. So just to make it a simple thing. Now, having gone through the 7 attitudes, what I want you to realize is that if you're a baby coming into your mother's womb, and I'm going to mix these up now, and let's say your mother's soul coding is the idealist, but you're coming in with the realist, then your mother is going to always give you the best of her abilities in her ideal consciousness, which to you, the child, might not fit into your wants and needs. So let's say, use an example, that you decide you want to draw and you've got all your crayons out, and out of the blue Mum comes in and says, okay, put all your things away, we're going for a walk in the park. She thinks the ideal thing is to get some air in your lungs, have you run and jump and get some exercise, and she is pretty well knowing what you need in order to bring out more of your personality and character. Meanwhile, you don't want to go, so you're running around in circles complaining, and then she still insists you're going out, and you watch all your crayons put away, and then you decide to play up as the realist and show her in no uncertain terms, I'm not going in to go out to the park or wherever she wants to take you, because you still want to do drawing. So you go and get your pencils or your crayons, whatever I said, out again and start doing them while she's busy looking for your coat. And then she sees that you've disobeyed her. So we can get a conflict there, Mum's will against child's will. Yeah, so whatever you've gotten in your womb from your mum is part of her personality. And as you grow up and watch her and copy her until you're about 8 or 9, you do not question her skills and abilities, and you want to be the same. But when you get older and you start to detach from her, cut the apron strings, then you will pick up the attitude of the father or grandfather, whoever the male person is in the household, to also attune to their attitude that is their primary attitude that's in their soul coding. So let's say Daddy is a skeptic. So you start to look at Mother with skeptic eyes, and you start to say, well, why do you want to go to the park? And what do you think we're going to do while we're at the park? And can I have an ice cream while we are at the park? And is it going to be warm? Do I need a sweater or not? You know, these kinds of questions are all about testing the waters with Mother, while also saying at the end of the question and answer session, I don't want to go, or I do want to go, but I don't want to go for the reasons you're saying. I want to go for another reason. For example, I'd like to go and kick my ball around the grass. So you can see this personality growing with an attitude of how you want to be seen and heard in this world. If I take one more, let's say we have the idealist with the pragmatist. The idealist is saying, we'll go to the park, we'll have a wonderful time, and we'll have ice cream, and you can kick your ball, and you can do all these things. And the back of the mind of Mother, as the idealist, is saying, and then when we get home, you can have your nap, and I'll get a bit of peace, and I can have a cup of tea. Meanwhile, the pragmatist is saying, well, I want to do that. I want to go run around, I want to kick my ball and have some fun. But when I get home, I want to watch TV instead, watch my favourite child's programme. And Mum's saying when you get home, no, you have to go and sleep. So now the child doesn't want to sleep. Dogma comes up, and attacks her idealist abstraction part and says, okay, you go make your tea, I'll wait till you come back and I'll watch my program while you're doing that. And then the child gets away with not having a nap, and mother gets to have her tea and everybody's happy. Just to show how they integrate. Now, it's much more complicated than that when you start thinking about your ancestors. And when I do a reading, sometimes the spirit guides go back quite a few generations in showing how character develops through the attitudes from ancestor to ancestor, passed down through the womb from the mother to the child, and how the child then puts their combined attitudes of learned from mother, father, and anyone else, and that becomes their RNA. And so that's quite involved, but that's a simple way of putting it. Now, once you have looked at your archetype, your goal, your modes, and your attitudes, and understand how you've absorbed the coding of your ancestors there, you then start looking at your centers. And the centers are the good part, because this is your spiritual self. This is the you that you've encoded from the oneness. This is the real you, if you like. Now, I'll use me again as an example, but I'll first tell you what the centers are. They align with crown chakra, heart chakra, base chakra, and the aspects of these three chakras coming together gives you a rationale in your solar plexus, gives your spleen chakra, runs diagonally through your waistline, left rear to right front, brings your divine consciousness in to balance your ups and downs emotionally and mentally. The higher intellectual is the coding that makes sure that while you're in embodiment, you are psychic. It allows you on a positive level to integrate yourself with as many people as you want to. And of course, a medium, a healer, a coach, a counselor, a tutor, a teacher, and a lawyer, all these people who help us out with issues are often very psychic and are inspired to give us as much help and guidance as possible. And what that gives us is ingratiation about who we are and the world that we live in and the people that help us. So when we are integrated with them, we become like them. We copy them. We admire them. We honor them. We respect them, and we integrate ourselves with them. And we like to feel we belong to them. Okay, and that is a oneness energy. But we are all part of the oneness, so we all belong to one another. But what if you're in a negative environment and you don't quite get what everyone's saying to you? Then you can move over into the negative side, which is telepathy. Now, the reason telepathy is negative is because we can pick up the thoughts of someone else and act upon it, and accordingly believe whatever it is that they've shared with us emotionally, to find out that it's upset our own balance. We copycat, remember? It's the DNA and the RNA. And so if we take on someone else's habits and routines and rituals and live a life side by side with them, over time we do find ourselves knowing what they're thinking before they actually open their mouths and tell us, and we say, oh, I was just thinking that. So you can see telepathy is there, but it only comes as a way of sorting out issues. You don't need telepathy when you're integrating yourself with someone, because you have the oneness there at your fingertips and you just know, and that's the key to that. So your higher intellectual comes out in your heart chakra. In other words, your spiritual brain flows down into your heart chakra and gives you a feeling this is the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. This is my mum. This is the person I trust with all my heart. This is my dad. This is a person I love so much because he takes care of me and does whatever I need to do. Well, that's the ideal. Of course, families today have lots of ups and downs, and there's more than one child, and so in some big families they all have to pull their weight and be responsible. And this is where the centers really do help a large family to harmonize. They learn to see many different points of view because there's so many people in the family, and they learn to not judge the family but rather to go along with everyone and what they're saying and doing. So a child growing up in a large family can be very much trained and encoded by the family to develop their personality from the modes with the characteristics they've taken from their family members in the RNA. And that includes their thoughts, their emotions, their body language, and yes, their spiritual beliefs. Now, if you're encoded with what I call normal intellectual, just intellectual, what that means that thought is important. In other words, people will come up to you and say, "Oh, I bought a new blue dress. What do you think?" and you're standing there thinking, "Well, I'm not thinking, I'm feeling it, and I'm really sensing you look really beautiful in blue." On the other hand, you could be another intellectual, normal, rational, everyday self and be able to say, "Well, it's okay, it looks nice, but I think lavender's better for you." Okay, so when you're having a regular intellectual level and not psychic, you're going to have a point of view, and you're going to want to share your thoughts about that point of view. And you'll do it emotionally, gently, in a nice way, so that you're not upsetting someone, because the higher intellectual and the intellectual comes through the heart chakra. Now, if you're a normal intellectual everyday person, which is nothing bad, that's pretty good, we need people who've got their feet on the ground, then you might have some sort of reason in your brain that you're thinking why you don't want to do things with other people. And it might be, for example, I'm going to give a very common one that I saw in Japan a lot: young children who refused to go to school because they were being bullied, which is a good reason why not to go to school. And no matter what their parents say about education and how important it is and so on, they refuse to come out of their bedrooms because they don't want to go and be bullied. There's the reason, and that leads to more negativity in time. And of course, this is all about the spiritual side of self. So whether you have a high intellectual and you're psychic, or whether you have a regular intellectual, your heart is processing what you feel. So if you have a high intellectual, you're processing spiritually. If you have a regular intellectual level encoded, you're processing physically in the world that you live in. The next two pairs are the higher emotional and the emotional center, and these come out in your brain, in your crown chakra. So when you go out and about in a positive mode with the high emotional, then you feel people, you feel your way through life. Your psyche says, "Oh, I feel you, you're just like me, I have empathy with you, we have a lot in common." And when we share, we tend to talk about spiritual things as well as everyday stuff. So this bonds us together spiritually. And the negative side is intuition. And of course, when psychics are developing, they will say they're being intuitive because they're building ideas founded on their practical experiences, and they're identifying those things within themselves, and then they come into the contact with someone else who's similar with this empathy, so they can also pick up the intuitive aspects of the negative as well. So this gives a person, a psychic healer, the ability to not only feel their patient/client, or to heal them, to know intellectually what is wrong with them through the higher intellectual. But with the normal emotional sense coming in underneath that, then they're going to try and do sensible things like advise certain alternative medicines. And if they're talking about events that happened in the past, there'll be a quantum amount of emotional bonding with things that happened that were delightful versus things that were not. So the intellectual part is monitoring all this with excuses, rationale, or spiritual information. So when we come to the higher emotional center, it does the opposite. It takes the emotions and puts them into reality from a spiritual point of view. So when you empathize with this new person you've met, you actually have to sit down and have long talks to share one another, to know more about what you both really think. And with the lower emotional, that is, you're just everyday kind of emotional person, no psychic senses, you're using your sensibility versus sentimentality. So, I feel you, I feel your anger, I'm sensing your face has an angry look in your eyes, I'm saying loud alarm calls, stand back, move away, give them space, I'm going to go off and do something else because I don't want to be drawn into emotional trauma. It's very self-protecting as a regular emotional level. And of course, if we get into sentimentality about all the things we've done in our life, and if we see that it's been mostly negative, we lose all sense of trust in ourselves or in anyone else, and we often make big issues about stuff in the past because we want people to understand where we're coming from intellectually, and so we tend to hog the scene with our stories to get attention. And of course, the ultimate thing in logic is the heart wants to be loved for who we are and for what we're giving. And that love isn't about love as man to woman or mum to child, but love spirit to spirit. So a person who's just got normal emotional may well have a very strong urge to want to go to church, synagogue, or temple somewhere and feel connected to God that way, because they don't really feel it in terms of inspiration or psyche stuff unless they decide to be more sensible about these things, not guard themselves against it, but rather to inquire. And in inquiring, will learn quite a bit about their spirituality, but they will never really be a fully developed medium. They would just have impressions and probably be content with a tarot pack to do readings. Now, the third section that comes into the body is moving and sexual centers. The moving center is very much a part of the brain for the higher ascended person. So the way I explain this in my Donald Trump book, Donald Trump, The Enigma of Society and His Ancestors and so on, was to show you how his enduring belief in his position as a president never flaked. It was always there. He knew he was where he was and he had to do what he was doing. That was his inspired self. And whatever he did, it always became a drama, which is energetic, form coming in as energy is moved. So his vibration in having interaction with a moving center means I'm here to clean up the world. Now, that doesn't mean that he literally himself cleans up the world. It's by his conversations, by his examples, by the things that he's done, he's leaving messages. Now, not everybody gets all the messages because nobody is 100% Donald. They're not in his skin. They're not had his ancestry. And so his way of sharing himself is unique to him. And those who followed him had similar processes going on in their life, so they bonded and wanted to collectively be with him. Now, that comes directly back into the higher echelon of the oneness, the archangels, and the whole soul coding that I'm not going into now. But there is encoded within a person someone who's going to be at a certain place, a certain time, and do a certain thing for a certain reason. It will come to pass here through the centers of the spiritual part of self that knows there is a destiny thing one has to do. And it's not always good. We've had some terrible things, people blowing up people with bombs, and we all say, how could they do that? But the bottom line is they believe through reason, through their attitudes, through their modes of personality, and of course their goals and their goal in life, what they come to do, could be destructive. And in that mode, to wake us all up to stop sitting on your laurels and start realizing changes upon us. So a moving center gives us an enduring ability to keep going, and the logic of the brain has 1,001 different variations on a theme for us to choose from. And the spiritual awareness that we have that comes with the psyche of the higher intellectual or the higher emotional aspects of being psychic will bring the moving center forward in consciousness, in body, to know that you have a chore, you have a purpose, you have something to do. In my case, it was to build a school. And as I got older, because I saw bigger and better things, it became a university. And today I'm building a university online, I hope, because I'm very much believing in the oneness, and my spirit guides will help me, so I don't doubt, really. All right, so if a person is in their moving center and they're not evolved spiritually, in other words, they got it all at their fingertips, but they haven't evolved to realize to use it yet, then they'll be learning in the earlier years energetically by trial and effort. This works, this doesn't work, what's this about, why did this happen to me? All these question marks will come up for someone with a moving center to find answers. And I certainly was asking my spirit guides morning, noon and night, what's this? And of course they were there to give me insights. And yes, I was energetically negative many times during my first 2 marriages, because I'd done the Prince Charming scenario and found out instead I'd got a weak chain or the ogre or something, So you have to adapt, and in adapting with these centers, you learn to find your own pathway, and you learn to stand on your own 2 feet, and of course you learn to connect to your spirit guides. Now, if you have the lower base chakra sexual coding, then you are likely to be amoral as you're brought up. You will think about what is your purpose, your destiny, how do you want to do it, how do you want to share yourself with people, what kind of people do you like, what kind of people don't you like, are they conducive to a good relationship, would they be someone to marry or someone to run away from, and so you're being very aware of the physical world and your physical place in the world with the sexual center. It can also take you into the negative side of blaming and shaming different types of men and women, animals, plants. You could have phobias, you could be erotic and having lots of sex because it's the base chakra. So what do you do with your base chakra? You store down there all your unlearned lessons. So people who have a lower sexual center in the root chakra are here to display to themselves and to others their imbalances in not harmonizing their mind, body and spirit into divine love. Now, the last one on its own is instinctive, and instinctive also backs up the high intellectual and the high emotional part, in that it gives you insights when to do and when not to do, where to go and why not to go. The words that we use here is atomic and anatomic. Atomic is like saying you have a consciousness of the cosmos, universal, spiritual, divine presence, the understanding of the evolvement of Earth in its many ways, to the physical part of self, where you're more locked into how do you build a house, where do you get water from, how do you protect yourself from illness and disease like COVID, what can you do, how can you improve the standards of the world by, for example, inventing a new video program. So there's a lot going on right now in the centers, in individuals. To run you by mine, I have a high intellectual, a high emotional center, so I'm very, very psychic. And I also have a moving center, which allows me to go into places and spaces that most people wouldn't do in the psyche, which accounts for the fact that I can read the soul structure coding of everyone, whereas most people cannot. I have the coding structured in this way so that I made sure that no matter what the ups and downs are in my life, that everything is a part of my journey in the oneness to arrive at a given point and do something, which of course I haven't arrived there yet, and in the doing something, leave something for the rest of the world. It's not an egotistical thing. This is a longing, this is a belief, this is a knowing, this is an understanding that comes from the spiritual world. And the spirit guides make sure that you keep on that pathway, because you're a little, shall we say, fleck or flick in the evolution of mankind. And you and thousands of others all over the world are flicking right now with moving energy a little bit now and again. And that causes a shift in our perceptions on the kind of world we want to live in. It shifts our awareness of the spirit world in terms of we want to belong in divine love and divine wisdom. So the soul structure coding is very important from that dynamic way, that we each leave something of us behind when we're gone that will in some way help this world to evolve. So even if you're just knitting sweaters and giving them as goodwill stuff to people who haven't got any sweaters, you're doing your bit. It's not about standing on a dais and running a country. It's not about being the only inventor of a computer. As you know, everyone is trying to create and invent something. And that's very important, because if we had the same things day in, day out, we would get bored, we wouldn't evolve, we wouldn't transcend. Also, if we didn't have negative and positive conflict within ourselves and with other people around the world, we wouldn't look for new ways to do things. We wouldn't ask ourselves, why am I living? We wouldn't even worry about death, because we wouldn't even know about life after death. So the spiritual coding, the centers, is highly important to our continuation to being here on earth. And when I do the reading, I go into your mother's coding, I may go into your ancestors, I don't know where I'm going, but wherever it is, it will make sense to you by the time you've listened to it all. Now, having given the 6 parts, the 7th part is the chief features, and the chief features are not nice. I'm going to read them all. I've got it written down here. Greed, self-destruction, arrogance, self-deprecation, impatience, martyrdom, and stubbornness. Now, we all have those traits in us, but there's always one that's stronger than the rest, okay? And my particular thing for me is arrogance. But I've also got impatience. I know that. I will go out and I get in line and I see someone fiddling around. They got coupons and this and that, and and I'm in a hurry and I want to get out in a hurry. That's impatience. I've got something else to do, but I'm using it. It's not my encoded part. It's the part of me that learns. By being impatient and rushing, I miss something, and I learn the hard way that I have not paid full attention to the negative side or to other aspects of things happening in my life. Yes, I can tell you there have been many times where my impatience has thwarted me from moving on. But that's how you learn. But my actual soul coding is arrogance, and what that means is I have to have pride in what I do. If I didn't have pride in what I do, then I would be put down so many times by so many people throughout my life that I would have given up, and I wouldn't be who I am today. So having the arrogance of my style of daredevil, let's put it that way, while everyone's telling me it can't be done, I have the arrogance to say, I'll find a way. And I have, time and time again. And fortunately for me, because I'm so psychic, I'm able to listen to spirit and download their words, channel them, and help people in some way, shape or form in the way that they need. And I'm very proud of that I've been able to talk to, I don't know, it's beyond count, because spirit have told me at one time in my life that I read over 20,000 people in England alone, and then one day they told me the same in Japan, physically, because I kept a record of over 20,000 people I taught. So that's 40,000 people, never mind all the people I've done online, never mind all the conferences I've done, never mind all the mini readings I've done. It just blew my mind away when my spirit guide started to say, without your pride, you would not have done what you've come to do. And yes, my father gave me a great deal of pride about our ancestors and made sure that I knew what their talents and skills were, and that I was in the following line of all of this. And of course he was part of my soul ancestry too, so I had a long line of talents to inherit, which I'm grateful for. And if I got out of order and was doing something wrong, then I had to watch that I didn't get vain. One of the things that they told me back when I was young is you have to dress the part. So if I was going to give messages at a spiritist church, I had to put on a suit, and I couldn't wear pants. In those days it was a skirt, so you had to look smart and businesslike, so that people realized that you were someone of appearance that they could trust. Of course, today now people turn up in t-shirts and jeans, and it doesn't matter, nobody cares what you're wearing, because we've gone past that status. We've moved on from appearances or everything. But we have to watch that we don't get vain when you have this arrogance, because vanity, I always used to hear, I'm reminded, vanity is thy name, woman. Stand in front of the mirror, make up your face, make sure your lines are filled out, make sure your clothes look good, etc., etc. And I remember, spending ages getting ready for whatever I was going to do in the public eye, and shaking from head to foot because I was so nervous, and I was so young and immature, and not sure of what I was doing in those days. But now today, I'm not vain. I mean, yes, I like to put my makeup on, but no, at home, if I'm going shopping, no makeup, out I go. Don't even think about the fact that I haven't got makeup on, okay? And I don't worry about what people think about whether I have it on or not, because we're all entitled to our own opinions. And if we start trying to compare our opinions with other people, especially when you have arrogance as I have, then you could be seen as someone who's invading people's spaces with your information and causing them umbrage and them getting upset with you. And then what's happening? We got enemies instead of friends. So what does the chief feature do? It allows you to step into the Maya, go through all the negativity, learn your lesson the hard way, and then shoves you right back into your archetype, your goal of your life, and your modes. In other words, you wake up and realize, oh gosh, I am being very negative, nobody likes me, nobody loves me, I need to change. I'm going to go back to my essence, which is your archetype, and without knowing it, you might not even know what your archetype is, but your essence will be there. For example, if I'm looking at my agape, joy, then okay, I'm going to go out and do something joyful. I'm not going to do something miserable. And that lifts me up, that picks me back up to feeling confident again. And then I can go out and teach and do whatever. And if I get in the vanity mode, hey, I've just read 50 people tonight with their messages. I'm really good. I'm not many people can do 50 people in one night. That wouldn't do me much good. But I had people coming up to me and saying, wow, you just read 50 people. And then I could say, well, yeah, if I had more time, I'd probably read some more. But that's not what it's about. I'm glad that you all got your messages, because now you can go away and be happy and do what you need to do, because you've got insights that's come from the oneness to help you move on. That's not to say that I haven't been vain in times. Of course I have. We all have to have vanity. That's what makes us realize that we feel good in our skin. It's when we overdo it, when we try and push too much. I'll just take a couple more. Self-deprecation, okay? Well, when you put yourself down, you're humiliating yourself. Do you realize that? You're trying to be humble. You're trying to say, well, it's just something I do. I'm not very good at it. And everyone else is going, God, this is fantastic. How did you do this? What did you do? Well, if you just go into humility and just sit there and say, thank you so much, it's so nice, it's just something I do, you've missed a good point in time where you can tap into your archetype, your soul coding, and turn around and say, well, I kind of taught myself, but I've been thinking about teaching other people. Perhaps you'd like to join me. I'll show you. Then you step away from your chief feature in a positive way, because that is the positive mode, and open up your skills back into your soul structure coding, not getting lost in everyday stuff. So the chief feature pulls you out of being stuck down in a rut, in a routine. Now the negative side of that is abasement. It's like, when you say you're putting yourself down, what you're really doing is critiquing yourself. You're saying, I'm not this and I'm not that and I can't be this and I'll never do that and nobody cares, and so I'm all alone. So what do? I just sit and rot with my misery. Okay, well, there's going to come a time when someone will come into your life and shake your bones up, as it were, and that will send you spinning right back into your soul structure coding. Nobody is left to wallow in the chief features. There's always someone that's going to pull you out of the mood you're in. Because yes, the chief features make us moody, depressed, feeling lost, and so on and so forth. I'll pick one more. I did impatience because I said I was doing that. But you have the audacity, to go up front and take over, by the way, when you're impatient. And that could be very upsetting for people who are trying to establish their own self in some way. So you have to be careful with impatience, that you don't knock people out of your picture and out of their lives, or whatever is going on. The negative side is interference. So if I, for example, went to a rally on mediums, and somebody's saying that all mediums are angels, and let's say I disagree, if I stand up soon after their talk and say, so-and-so said that all ministers are angels, and I have to say they're not angels, they are administering angels on earth, I've corrected her mistake, I've also put her down. So impatience can bring tact in. It can bring an understanding of saying things in the right way that anatomically, because it's physical, remember, impatience, that you're being kind in sharing something, and you have to be tactful in the way you say it. And sometimes it is necessary. I've found a few times when I've been on a panel and somebody has said something out of left wing that is absolutely not a reality, something they've read somewhere. And I did on that occasion say, I heard so-and-so saying such and such, and I acknowledge and understand their perception, but I also have heard and tested and gone out and researched and found out that, in my opinion, that was once a reality but no longer is a reality, because the research has shown this and this and this. It's tactful, you see. It's how you say something. So each of these chief features teach us to think before we open our mouth, to think before we act, to think before we do anything, think it through from beginning to end in a practical way, and spiritually to surrender to the inner self and to the oneness in our spirit guides. And so the chief feature will loom up and knock you out of your negativity, knock you out of your state of mind and heart being so low and miserable, and put you back on track with your soul coding in your destiny. So that's where I come in. When people are really miserable and lost in one of their the chief feature. And by the way, like all other parts, you can borrow them. You can have a period where you're in self-deprecation and you're saying that your cake wasn't very good, and I'm sorry, and I'm apologizing, I didn't have enough icing, and all these excuses. We do that, and you're entitled to use any part of any of these chief features, but there's always one that is the core that pushes you back. It's your safety net that pushes you back from the darkness into the light. And without it, you might never know you're making mistakes. You might never know you've lost your way. You might never know that you have a spiritual connotation behind everything you're doing. The chief feature is very important. So having shared that with you, and spent another hour talking about the second half of the soul structure reading, you can see just to explain the parts of it has taken me over 2 hours. So when I'm doing a soul structure reading, when I'm channeling it from the spirit guides, it is very, very informative, and in many cases it can take up to 3 hours. My fee is normally $200 an hour, but for this soul structure reading, because I really believe that people should know about it and learn about it and integrate with it by knowing they have it, and see how it leads them through life psychologically, emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually, then it's like a present from heaven. And when I'm channeling it, the spirit guides give me all the details that are relevant to where you are at and where you're moving on to. So we will be looking at mom and dad, we will be looking at siblings where necessary. I will be asking you for some of that information, names and ages. I don't want too much information about them, but I do just need to, I can't call them he and she all the time, it would be confusing. So using names and ages is good. Sometimes I'll go into astrology with it, sometimes I'll go into very spiritual readings with it, because that's where the person's at. Sometimes it'll be very practical, down to earth, because the person's flying high and not grounded. Sometimes they're so grounded they can't get off the ground, they can't get into their spirituality. There's so many different reasons why one would want a soul structure coding reading. But what I will say is that ultimately you will get not only what you think you need now, but also what you'll need in the future. Because the spirit guides will paint the picture of what you're going to do in the future. And when you know your soul structure coding, you will be able at that time in the future to apply it. And that will make it even easier for you to sail through that particular change in your future. I have been doing soul structure readings since about 1989. And I was doing parts of it before that because I had to learn about how it all worked. So Spirit would give me my coding in bits, and then I'd work on myself, and then when I'd mastered that, then they'd come back and say, okay, it's time for part 2, and so on. So when I teach this class in a course so that you can become a psychic and a healer, it does involve first doing psychic development. And once you've done that, then you know that you can now tap into your spirit guides and receive the information from them as a direct channel. And with the knowledge that you then go on to do the soul structure coding study, you will be amazed just how much you can read other people as well. So, last but not least, I will say to you, please go to easypeasysolutions.org. That's as it's spelled, EASYPEASY, solutions.org. Put your name in there, put your interest, put your phone number, times I could contact you. If you want a reading, say so, and say what type of reading you do want, because you may not want a soul reading. You may want something to do with a relationship, or something to do with the kid's health or something. Yes, I can read anybody anywhere in the world, whether you're online with me, whether you just send me an email, whatever it is that you need, I can help you, because I walk amongst the archangels, the ascended masters, the oneness, and so I can channel for you what you need to know. If you don't want to go to easypeasysolutions.org, where we're giving free talks, you can go to Sumaris Education Center, S for sugar, U, M for mother, ARISCENTER, Mr. Education, Sumaris, SUMARIS, EDUCATION, CENTER, American spelling, .com, and you can leave your information there, and my girl will get back to me and let me know you've said that you want a soul reading. If you want any other type of reading, I can do that for you too, at the same rate now. So my fee is $150 an hour. The soul structure reading will take 2 hours. If I go over, because some people do take longer, I'm not charging you anymore. My normal rate is $200 an hour, so this is a good reduction. Okay. So if you are ready and really want your soul structure coding to understand why you're here in this life, what you're going to do, and what it's important about, and so on, all these different angles, or if you want to know why you don't get on with your mother and father, that all comes out in the soul reading. So let me know. I'll be there for you. Take care, and do enjoy all my other videos that I have on soundcloud.com/Ask Dr. Margaret. You'll find my old radio shows, Journey into an Unknown World, there as well. And you'll find my lectures on the Great Piscean Age and the Great Aquarian Age we've just started. You'll find other talks too. So enjoy. There's lots there for free. I like to give things for free. Be well. Be happy. Hope to hear from you soon. Bye.